We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Despite what the Fourth Estate tells us, it may not be all unicorns and rainbows for the American jobs economy. To join us today to discuss what light lies at the end of the tunnel, is it sunlight or a careering train coming to greet the jobs market, we're joined by Mr. Andrew Moran. Andrew, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, Andrew, you wrote a fantastic article this week on the employment figures, because the jobs market, it looks quite good, doesn't it? The view from 30,000 feet, I think they call it. Although, with inflation, that's gone up to 50. It looks quite good, but that's not really the case, is it?
No, so the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, they release a report every quarter called the 50 States and District of Columbia report. And it looks at the Bureau of Labor Statistics quarterly census of employment and wages, or QCEW report. And it found that all those monthly jobs reports that the BLS reports were completely overstated. So the Fed Bank of Philadelphia noted that as through December 2023, the BLS overstated job growth by 800,000. So the official tally is that the U.S. the U.S. economy created 3 million, but subtracted by 800,000, that's the real number. So the Fed is—
sorry, Andrew, I got to interrupt. I love that you did a bit of a Freudian slip there, because you said that the federal government created.
Yeah.
That's actually not far off the truth, is it, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at the BLS jobs data, you show that the federal government, or government in general, excuse me, has been the top job creator in 2023. And that's the official number. So if you look at just government jobs in general, it's they were the top job creator. But if you also factor in sectors that rely heavily on government funding, like healthcare or social assistance, then you would assume that the government accounted for pretty much half of all jobs. And then you add in sustenance jobs like retail, leisure, and hospitality, and you suggest, okay, so the main employment trends in the United States today is either government or sustenance jobs, and that's not really a good portrait of an economic landscape.
It's not. I was sorry to interrupt you on your flow there. So let's get back to that. So it's actually 800,000 jobs overestimated with these rainbow glasses that they seem to be wearing, but that's not the only problem, is it?
Well, I guess the other factor, too, if that's what you're alluding to, if the divergence between the establishment and the household surveys, as you and I have repeatedly discussed, you see such a huge gap. So, for example, in the last jobs report, it showed that the economy lost about 184,000, as opposed to the establishment survey, which showed about 275,000 new jobs, which, of course, will be downwardly revised. So, you can't apply malice to perhaps the statisticians. You could just perhaps either apply incompetence or just people fiddling around with the Microsoft Excel formula sheet.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. So what does this really mean for the economy in general? We have less jobs coming in. So I may be going about this the wrong way, but it seems to be where my mind leads me on this. Now, we have these projected jobs that have turned out to be grossly inflated. And so with that, there's projections of a tax take for the coming years, right? They don't just say, oh, here's the jobs, and they don't do anything else with the data. They start projecting these tax takes that are coming in. And then they craft legislation that says, well, what we'll actually do is we'll receive this much tax money in based on these calculations. And then they pass the legislation, which is essentially just spending. And then, of course, there's a shortfall, isn't there? Because there was 800,000 less jobs, which meant the tax take was more, which means the calculation for the legislation they've passed that is now the law of the land is going to be grossly underfunded. Or have I got that wrong?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And then this creates a huge problem, because then the government's just going to spend more, expecting that, okay, this is the amount of revenue that we're going to receive, either based on this type of tax legislation or this type of stimulus program or whatever concoction that these bureaucrats and politicians come up with. So yes, that's absolutely a problem. And the other factor with jobs data is that by the time, let's say, the QCEW is reported, that's outdated. Those are outdated numbers. Yeah. Nobody cares anymore. The financial markets or the Federal Reserve are not going to really pivot, or they're not going to start selling stocks based on something that happened back in May 2023. So the monthly non-farm payrolls report gives cover to the administration, because I highly doubt come November President Biden's going to say, oh well, yeah, November 2023 the numbers were off slightly, but I'm still have a great jobs report. He's just going to focus on the latest numbers and the
Yeah.
official tally, and that's going to benefit him tremendously. And Trump is not going to really take advantage of it because he probably has no clue that these numbers are out there.
Well, that's the thing, right? Who really knows that there's so much divergence in thing because nobody's talking about it. Another thing that people aren't talking about, Andrew, is inflation. What happened? Why is everybody ignoring the fact that inflation is still realistically just added 18% costs to your living, but nobody's talking about it anymore? Why is that?
Well, I would disagree. I think a lot of people are talking about that, especially when you have 2 consecutive months of hotter than expected data. And what's also fascinating is that the way inflation is trending is exactly has been my concern from the 1970s, 1980s, is that it's emulating those trends from that time period. And that's something you and I discussed in this program before, and that's something Liberty Nation has reported on. And so, who knows if it's going to, return to those types of levels. So that's a fascinating trend to watch. The other factor, too, is that there was a great report that came out recently, and it's something that also we've discussed many times. It showed that if you calculated inflation pre-1983, that June 2022 peak of 9% would actually be double. So yeah, in today's environment, you have a climate of where government overstates jobs, understates inflation to make everyone look good.
It's kind of crazy, isn't it? It's the topsy-turvy world. But let's talk about what you just mentioned there, Andrew, with how the data for inflation is counted differently. So I believe what you're referring to here is that the unimportant things, the things that don't really matter to, people, like food and housing, they're not counted in inflation anymore, right? It's just other things like men's trousers and tires. Is that right?
Well, they're all. If you look at the consumer price index, they're all factored into it. The
Sure.
problem with the consumer price index is that are the weights attributed to things. So
Yeah.
they said, so for example, in the CPI, the Bureau of Labor Statistics accounts health insurance for, I think, 5 cents for every dollar you spend. In the United States, is there anybody who spends 5 cents for every dollar applied to health insurance? That is complete nonsense. So the CPI, the way the methodology is done, it's completely wrong. And there's something needs to be done with the way this data is collected, because nothing adds up. The people on the ground see something completely different than what the statisticians see. I think I likened it in my article to the French aristocracy in the 17th century, where everyone was just hanging out in Versailles and they had no clue what was happening in the rest of the country. In the United States, everyone just hangs out in Washington, D.C. with no clue what's happening in Biloxi, Mississippi.
Final question for you, Andrew. Come September, the month before the election, does Joe Biden brag about inflation?
Oh, yeah, of course, because he was going to say, oh, hey, it's down from its peak of 9%. So, yeah, of course he will.
And people will likely be happy with that response. Andrew Moran, thank you ever so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at libertynation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are libertynation.com.